Welcome to the only show that brings you happenings from the diplomatic community right here in Ghana, Africa, and the rest of the world. Anything that has to do with diplomacy and international relation is of interest to us, and we do our best to bring to you the people who make this happen. Well, today on the show is the ambassador of Denmark to Ghana, and we will be talking about bilateral relations between Denmark and Ghana. Denmark is a very important partner to Ghana's development, and they have been friends since. Should I say we have been friends since? So we have a very special thing going on as two countries. I have been waiting for the opportunity to speak with him since he came into the country. He's done, I think, almost 2 or 2.5 years in the country. And we had the opportunity to speak with his predecessor before she left. And of course, it is my job to introduce them as they come into our beautiful country for us to learn about the good relations that exist between our country and, of course, yes, today we are focusing on Denmark. Welcome back. The show is Diplomatic Affairs. My name is Harriet Nartey, and of course, as I mentioned earlier, the ambassador of Denmark to Ghana, His Excellency Tom Noring, is my guest. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show, Tom.
And it's a great pleasure to have you here in my living room.
Right, I am in Denmark right now.
Exactly.
I can say that. Well, Tom.
Yes.
How do you find Ghana? You've been in the country for the past 2 years or 2.5 years.
2.5 years.
2.5 years. How many more years do you have to go?
At least 1.5 years more.
Okay, that's
that I know. It's in principle 4 years. Yeah.
Okay, so 4 years you've been in the country.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the places you served as ambassador, representing your country before your appointment.
I've actually been on the road, so to speak, since January 2007. So I've had a stint of almost 6 years in Greece from January 2007. After that, 4 years in Hungary, then 4 years in Australia, and now on my 3rd year in Ghana.
Interesting. Do you love your job?
I think it's fantastic.
It's fantastic.
What a great opportunity to get.
To serve your country.
I am the lucky gypsy that gets to travel the world. Yeah.
I have been curious. I know there is so much happening between Denmark and Ghana. The two countries have been friends since the 17th century. I think I read somewhere, this was when the Danes set foot in Ghana.
That's true.
And diplomatic relations, this was, I think, as soon as Ghana's independence, things actually grew, and then we moved to a better place. Can we just lightly, for the sake of our viewers, just go back to history a little bit, and then before we come to where we are now?
Well, we could put it this way, that we could go back to what you could call a dark chapter of both countries' history, exactly, back to the times of slavery. And we were here, it's very true, in the years when this was the Gold Coast. We are not proud of that, but we are proud of having had a super relationship ever since. So I really attribute that a lot to Ghanaians more than to us, because you have a special way of being, a special way of receiving people when they come to your country. And I guess it's been like that all the time. That Akwaba is originally a Ghanaian word. So when you come to Ghana, you feel welcome. And that has been part of the basis, the platform for our relationship, I think. There's no doubt to me that the relationship has been good ever since it was what I call the dark chapter. Because you see today the pride that many Ghanaians still have in being ancestors of Danes. You meet people here in Ghana that are called Hansen, Jensen, Wolf, etc. And they're proud that they can trace their history back to when there was a Danish man here who met a Ghanaian woman and they had children. Today, with many years gone by, it's probably a little hard to see that there was a white man here in the color of the face and the color of the eyes. But sometimes it actually happens that you will find a little baby born with blonde hair and blue eyes.
Yes.
Sometimes that creates a little bit of a problem for the mother to explain. But, it is not because there was something hanky-panky going on just
Right.
before, but because these genes still come back once in a while. So I think, the fact that you go for a walk in Osu and the streets have names after Danes, you talk to historians in Osu and they can tell you the story of 200 years ago.
Some of the legacies.
Exactly, and you have a house right there on the road out to Osu Castle today, which was Christiansborg Castle at the time. There's Frederiksminde there, a house that is still today inhabited by the Wolf family, 200 years, more than 200 years later. This is fantastic.
Let's talk about your appointment to Ghana. Will I be right to state that it is your first job on the African continent?
It's the first posting on the African continent. I have been here on business travels, brief business travels, but it's the first time that I'm serving as an ambassador in Ghana, in Africa.
In Africa, right.
Absolutely.
And we happen to have it here.
But actually it was not necessarily Ghana, I have to say, but right when I started my diplomatic career, and that goes back to the mid-80s, not 1880s, please, 1980s, I actually applied to go to Africa, also to Asia. I wanted to try something else than the Western world that I was used to. I was not given a posting in Africa or in Asia. So you can say at the end of my career, I'm getting what I asked for to begin with.
Right.
So
Sometimes
it's
it
the
doesn't
circle.
work the way you want
The
it
circle
to.
ends where you wanted to start it,
Exactly.
but that doesn't mean it's not a circle.
Sure. I like that. I asked that question because I want to pick your mind on your view of Africa before you even stepped in the soil, African soil.
Well, let me say I had kind of two approaches to coming here, or views, expectations maybe. One, I have been to Africa a few times. I've been to Burkina Faso and other places. So I kind of had an idea, but I also had read up on where was Ghana now? 2020 when I was arriving here. Ghana being a country that has developed significantly over the last 20 years, with an economy that was booming for many good reasons, with a society that had changed over time. And I had very, very high expectations when I came to Ghana, to see a country that was really taking up the challenge that it is to go from a basic, you could say, agrarian society to a more developed society with all the good and bad that there is in a so-called developed society. And I think there I have been, let's say, I've experienced it, both positive and negative. There's a lot that has happened here. Everything works in Ghana if you want it to. But there's also things that I was kind of sad to see have not quite made it yet. I had a greater expectation for a larger part of the Ghanaian society having made that transition to a slightly higher level of living standards, getting more out of poverty than what you see when you travel the country as a whole. So there I had hoped to see more. I also know that it can happen because I met a society with a lot of young, talented people who really know where they want to go. They have the drive. They have the opportunities somewhere out there. They just have to be, let's say, coached, or you have to find the incentives to really get there. And I think there's still some steps on that road that we need to explore together.
Right.
And I think we've been here, as you said, we've been here for many years now. We've been here through a long period where we have been one of the key, I dare say that, although I come from a country of less than 6 million people,
Right.
we've still been one of the key development partners here. Over more than 3 decades, we've provided aid in numerous sectors. I think, I don't want to be shy here, I think we've had an impact. I think things have changed in Ghana also due to Danish development assistance. But I also think times are changing, and I think this is the time for that change. Ghana is no longer, and that's your government's own, let's say, way of looking at it, it's Ghana beyond aid.
Have we really transitioned from aid to doing business together?
The answer is probably not yet. But the positive thing is that you're on the road. You are going in the right direction. So it's a matter of time. And sometimes people ask me from back home, ignorant Danes, more ignorant than me, about Africa and where's Africa and is it ever going to happen? Because there's still places without electricity, without sanitation, without running water. Yes, you still have
And
it.
the trees
So
and all
a lot of these things. But we have to also, all of us, look back in history. We all have a history. So it's a matter of where you start and where you end. And we're not starting from the same place, but hopefully we'll end in the same good place. So it's just a matter of getting Ghana to that place, but also in the right pace. You cannot push things too fast. Sometimes that becomes almost impossible to digest. With that, I'm not saying that Ghana should slow down, but I'm just saying you're on the path, you're on the right direction. Getting there all the way is going to take time, no matter what. And that's maybe what struck me as, and I am a little ignorant in that sense because I didn't really know, I hadn't lived here before. So I had this expectation that things may have happened a little more than it had. On the other hand, I think I can see that Ghana is going in that direction. It's getting there. So it's just a matter of time. So when people now back in Denmark ask me, is Ghana ever going to make that? Because look at Denmark, look at Ghana. I say, yes. We go back 100 years in Denmark. Well, we didn't have electricity. When I was a kid, I still remember going to my aunt, and she lived in an apartment on the 5th floor, and in the middle of the winter when it was ice cold, -degrees, and I needed to go to the toilet 5 years old, I had to go 5 floors down into the back of the building where there was a little loo. It's not that long ago. Why shouldn't Ghana be able to make that same transition? Yeah, it takes time, but it doesn't take that long. It will happen. And when I look at people, just think about it. Even when you go out into the countryside, you go to a little village, and you think there's nothing here, there's nothing of the modern world. And then you meet a young guy and you start chatting with him and he takes out his mobile phone and says, you want to see a picture of my girlfriend or something? I mean, you know the world is changing and is changing fast. Modern technology is going to bring things much faster than it took us in Europe to develop, I think.
Right. Let me just play the devil's advocate here. Someone would say, well, it took you so many years to get where you are today as developed countries, if we are referring to developed countries. Developing countries, should we do it as you did it, or should we rather learn lessons from the mistakes that you made?
Absolutely, you should never just learn from, the success stories. The mistakes are really valuable, and some of them are so important that you should never make that mistake again. I mean, take things that have happened in Europe, First World War, Second World War, the Balkan Wars, just to take a few examples of what you don't want to copy. Never, never, never. So there are a lot of things you need to do. You can jump some steps. You can leap faster in some ways because you can look back at the mistakes that were made.
Yes.
Of course, the worst thing you can ever do is not learning from others' mistakes and from your own mistakes. So this is part of bringing up children as it is bringing up societies. We have to learn from our mistakes and our successes. And then we have to, as some American singer said a long time ago, I did it my way. Of course you have to do it your way. You're never going to build a Denmark in Ghana. Why? Why would you build Denmark in Ghana? I wouldn't want to build Ghana in Denmark. I wouldn't like to build United States in Denmark, and the Americans wouldn't like to copy us either, fully. But be inspired, take the best of all worlds and make it your own. And you have the opportunities. You have a lot of opportunities. And that's what also modern technology enables you to do today, because you're already there. You don't have to go through industrialization, for instance, because that has already taken place. With the mistakes and the success stories, you can, benefit from having the platform to start on that we didn't
Right.
way back.
Now, Tom, let's talk about when we come to Denmark and Ghana.
Mhm.
I would want to know why Ghana is so important to Denmark.
Well, I think first of all, whether we talk about it as a dark chapter in our history or not, we have a history that goes back many, many years, 500 years. So that in itself is a very good reason. The other good reason is that Denmark, as a country and in our, let's say, international involvement, have always been looking towards Africa. Our whole development policy today, if we go back to that, is focused on Africa. This is our primary focus for our bilateral development assistance, is Africa. We're very, very strong in Kenya, Uganda. We're very strong in Ethiopia. We're very strong in countries like Mali and Burkina Faso. Not as strong as we were a little while ago, because things have happened there. That makes it difficult for us to be there, but we're still there. We're still engaged. We still believe that we can make a difference with our development assistance, also in Mali, also in Burkina Faso. But we're also here in Ghana because Ghana stands for and is seen often as the beacon of democracy in West Africa and in most of Africa. You have a very, very strong profile, one that you sometimes should do even more to polish, because you deserve it. You have a very, very strong role to play. I think during your president's chairmanship of ECOWAS, there were 2 years that really proved how much of a difference Ghana could make. So I think that we really need to support Ghana as a democratic, free society that focuses on protection, defending human rights, that focuses on the multilateral system, that is not looking inwards, that is not looking for being the mighty, but doing things together. And I think that's really where we have a lot in common. Yes, Ghana is a much larger country. We are 30 million people. We're only a little less than 6 million people. But we're still, in the global context, small countries. We need each other, and we need to stand together. We need to be really the supporters of the United Nations and the multilateral system, the rule of law. Because without the rule of law, the first victims will be the small countries.
Is it a win-win situation for both of us?
Absolutely. We need each other. We need each other because this world is not really that big anymore. I mean, I spent 4 years in Australia, although I hated the very, very long trip to get there. It's still a small world. And we need to cooperate in so many different ways, in so many different multilateral fora, where we have a common interest. Also, I just mentioned how we are present in Mali and in Burkina Faso with our embassies doing development assistance still, even under difficult times. We are that because we believe that this was a way of assisting these countries in fighting also terrorism, international terrorism. We should also be here in Ghana because it's also threatening Ghana. The spillover from Mali, from Burkina Faso, from Sahel into Ghana is a serious risk. As I think a minister in your government said recently, it's not really a matter of whether this will happen. It's a matter of when this spillover will actually take place. We need to support Ghana to withstand that pressure, to not have that spillover, because that is in nobody's interest.
You talked about cooperation. I would want us to break it down. Which areas are we cooperating in as two partners?
Yeah.
I believe all of them are very important, but the ones that actually translate into the lives of the ordinary Ghanaian, the impacts.
Yeah.
Let's talk about those ones.
Well, in the past there's been many, but if we kind of focus on today, I think one of the areas that really makes a difference right now is water. Denmark has been lucky, or has been smart, in developing very, very good water solutions. We have ensured that we have clean drinking water in our country. We have no water loss in our pipes. In Denmark, we have a water loss of about 5%.
5%?
5%. That's nothing. You have a water loss of 40 to 50%.
50%.
So that there's a lot of technology, know-how, experience, know-how, technology that can be transferred to Ghana, and which is needed, because without clean drinking water, you have a problem developing as human beings.
We do.
And it's not just a matter of getting something to drink, but it's simply also a tool in securing a healthy human being. You cannot,
Potable water.
you cannot fight the diseases with dirty drinking water. It's simply not possible. So this is a very, very important part. It was important when we were here with bilateral development assistance. It's still very important. I was just yesterday in Kumasi with a Danish company that has been very successful up there, working together with Ghana Water, together with the local authorities up there, providing chemical solutions, aluminum chemical solutions to clean the drinking water, which reaches probably more than, at the end of the day, more than 5 million people in and around Kumasi. Yeah, there are other solutions as well. I'm not saying we invented the world, we didn't. But we learned from our friends up there from Ghana Water that with these solutions, or these Danish solutions, are 20% more effective than the previous solutions they were using. That makes a lot of difference, because water is not the world's most expensive product, but it's still expensive to get it to 30 million people. So you need to really watch out for this scarce resource and make sure that it's not lost, and that it's cleaned, and that it gets out to the customers, to the people at the end of the day.
Right.
So so this is really an area where I would say we've had a lot of cooperation, and we still have a lot, and there's still a lot to learn, but we're working together. I'm mentioning this with one Danish company. We have many Danish companies that provide different solutions. But we also have a new way of working together. We don't have development cooperation, as I said, but we have what we call strategic partnerships, or strategic sector cooperation. This we also have in the area of water. So we have developed a cooperation between Tema and the second largest city in Denmark, Aarhus, and the water utilities in the two countries, or in Aarhus Water and here Ghana Water, who work together on a daily basis to build up capacity in Ghana. So they're taking a lot of the experiences that we've learned, and they're capacity building every day, which is to the benefit of us, because we are developing ourselves, and Ghana, which is developing capacities that they didn't have before. A very, very successful cooperation. We do the same in other areas. We do it in the area of maritime cooperation.
Yeah, but we cannot talk about water without talking about sanitation. So I know you do water and sanitation.
Yeah, we do it together.
Yes. Right? Okay.
Absolutely. That we do, and we have also worked for many years supporting with sanitation solutions. We still do, even after after Corona. One of the things that we found was that there were some people that suffered from Corona. That's one thing, but there were a lot of repercussions after the Corona crisis, if you can put it that way, economic and otherwise, also social and health repercussions. That we found out that in Ghana, the poorest people in the densely populated cities of Accra and Kumasi were suffering heavily from not having access to clean drinking water and access to proper sanitation. So although we had phased out our development assistance, we decided still to ask our capital if we could do a little bit here and work together with UNICEF to do a program that supported the Ghana government's recovery program after COVID recovery program. So we did a program that looked at the most densely populated areas of Accra and Kumasi and provided clean drinking water, sanitation, pipes, but also looked into, for instance, the healthcare system. A lot of these places, you have the kids born without any kind of medical attention. You need to make sure they get their vaccines and proper attention when they're little babies. Even before they're born, the mothers get the necessary advice and supervision. We did that.
The country had a challenge of getting some children's vaccine into the country, and that was a huge problem
In northern Ghana especially.
Yes, right. Can we talk about, you mentioned security, as you mentioned security, we jumped security, then we talked about water and
we can jump back and forth, it doesn't matter.
So I would want us, because security is a very important issue. Without peace and security, nobody can actually, do anything. So in one way, I know that when we are affected, you are somehow affected. So we talked about the spillover. Let's talk about some of the measures. I know the EU, which you are a part of, is working with Africa and of course Ghana and these countries that have been affected regarding security issues. What are we doing when it comes to Ghana in protecting Ghana's territory?
Okay. You can say there's two things.
Right.
And if you look at what Denmark has been involved in, the first I would like to mention is maritime security. Now, you're well aware of the threat that pirates have been to the Gulf of Guinea in general.
Yes.
Of course, much of it is in and around Nigeria, but when you look at a map and you look at how fast these boats move, there's not a lot of distance between Nigeria and Ghana. So in general, a few years ago, the Gulf of Guinea was the most piracy-infected place in the world. It used to be off the Horn of Africa, but that changed. And for a number of years, the Gulf of Guinea was the worst place for civilian merchants shipping, because they were always under threat from pirates. So we engaged some years ago in a maritime security program in Ghana and Nigeria, with the Danish embassies, the two places, built up a program together, trying to support, first of all, trying to just support these two countries in developing national integrated maritime strategies to deal with maritime security, to deal with the piracy threat. This is the basis. You have to know what you're talking about before you can do anything else. But this was also meant as the basis for developing legislation, because piracy is a little different and difficult, because it happens out there in the open sea. So how do you deal with that legally? It's not easy if you don't have laws. Then you only have your laws that apply for the land. We know those, but they don't apply. So this strategy building has been the first step in reaching the next step, which would be then legislation. Ghana is still there. Nigeria actually has adopted a strategy and legislation. Ghana will get there. The strategy is there.
When are we getting there?
Well, the strategy the strategy was actually finished about a year ago. It's just not been finally endorsed by the cabinet and presented to Parliament. So you still need that last step before you can deal with the
Is it going to happen anytime soon?
According to your government, yes.
Okay.
So we have to take that at face value. This is what your Minister for National Security has told me, that this will happen. So it's a matter of time.
But we're sitting on the time bomb.
Yes, but the thing, well, in a way, yes, we are.
It's only a matter of time.
Yeah, and it still happens. I said it's not as much now as it was a couple of years ago, but it's still there. It's still a threat. Just 2 days ago, I think it was, a Danish ship was hijacked off the coast of Congo, I think it was, actually, but coming from Nigeria.
Hmm.
They are still, as far as I know, but I'm not updated. And when this show airs a little time later, maybe things will be different. But they're in the citadel, the whole crew,
Right.
which means they're locked up and the pirates are on board. So it's still very much real, this threat. So we're still engaged in this. We're engaged even more so because we said previously we would look at Nigeria and Ghana. That's where we had embassies. But when we came to the end of the program and were looking at the next phase, which was about a year and a half ago, I, together with my colleagues, said, but we have a string of pearls of countries here who are all affected, who all need to be able to deal with this issue, going all the way from Cote d'Ivoire through Ghana, Togo, Benin, Nigeria, and on the other side, Cameroon. All of these countries are potential victims of the threats from piracy and other maritime crimes, because it's not just piracy. You also have the issue of drug smuggling, weapons smuggling, human trafficking, and other maritime crimes. So we decided to expand our program to more countries, to go a little beyond just piracy, to look at other maritime crimes, and also to expand in time and in money. So that's right now where we are, developing that program and taking it the next step. It's also looking at the whole, what we call the whole justice chain. Every step of that justice chain has to work.
Right.
And you have to be able to deal with that and train, capacity build in each and every of these countries so that everybody knows what does it take when pirates are attacking. What are you allowed to do? What are you not allowed to do? How do you handle it when you, as a Navy vessel, gets involved, engaged, and maybe take prisoners? How do you deal with them? What are the measures? How do you investigate the crime when it's happening? How do you interrogate? What are you allowed to do? What are you not allowed to do? Who's trained to do that? We're not all trained to do that. So we're looking at all these aspects and trying to capacity build in all these countries. We're also trying to capacity build, so to speak, journalists. Because just until recently, when you talk to journalists here in Ghana about piracy, this was a very, very distant reality, maybe not even a reality.
Sure.
So what is it actually? Is it really something that matters? And yes, it does. So we're now through this program, in this case, together with the Kofi Annan Center, we are able to train journalists, create awareness at least of the problem and what it actually means. And then you could say, again, as you asked before, why does Denmark have an interest in that? Well, especially when it comes to shipping, we have a huge interest. If you imagine that you're standing on the beach down next to Osu Castle and look out and you see the ships out there, and every day of the year, there will be somewhere around 30 to 40 Danish vessels out there. We count for more than 30% of all merchant ships out there are Danish owned or operated.
And Denmark is the second, I think you are the second largest shipping, is it?
Container shipping.
Container
Yeah,
shipping.
we used, last year we were the largest shipping container country in the world, shipping company, Maersk. And this year I think it's the second largest. And we're one of the largest shipping nations in total in the world. So even though we're a small nation, when it comes to shipping, we're quite significant in size. And it matters to us. So it's not, we're not really just kind and nice people. We're also doing this for our own sake.
Right.
This is just a reality check. Danish shipping needs protection as well. This needs to work here as it works everywhere else.
Right.
And so we're engaged also for our own sake.
It's absolutely.
But we're also engaged, you can also say, what does it really matter that you have issues out on the open seas? Well, if you're a regular Ghanaian that has to go buy Christmas presents for your kids, for your family, friends. And the next time it's Christmas, and you know the cost of buying all that stuff is here. Well, if you have piracy threats, the cost of those goods, because they're all transported on the open seas, will go up. So it has a significant impact also
Right.
on the economies of all the coastal states of West Africa, and thus on everyday normal people.
So we are all affected,
All-
you know.
All of us.
Yeah, like you said, the world has become a very small place
Yes.
to live now. So if something happens to your neighbor, you do not really think about distance. Somehow you are affected.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how far they are from you. You know, so piracy is something that needs to be attended to. The law, I think they have to work on the law. The two countries.
It
Well,
will
happy Nigeria has done its part, you know, by adopting that, and we're waiting for Ghana to equally do the same. All right, so you're still watching Diplomatic Affairs, and I'm here with the ambassador of Denmark to Ghana, His Excellency Tom Norin. We are talking about all the issues of interest between Denmark and Ghana. I will take a break. When I come back, we will continue with our conversation. Please stay and stay with us. Welcome back. The show is Diplomatic Affairs. It airs every Saturday between the hours of 4 to 5 o'clock p.m. on Pan-African television. Also, we are on YouTube and Facebook, and of course in 46 African countries. So wherever you are in the world, you can always catch up with us when it comes to happenings in the world of diplomacy and international relations. We're still continuing our conversation with my guest, His Excellency Tom Norin, the representative of Denmark to Ghana. We've done so many very important topics already. Now we are moving on, and I would want us to, Tom, let's talk about, for me, revenue collection is a very important issue when it comes to a young country like ours, and I'm talking about Ghana. You have done it before, started, and you are here, and you have a very successful story to tell. So how can we do it? Let's talk about best practices.
Best practices.
Right.
Well,
In revenue collection.
in
best
revenue
practices.
collection. Well, no country can function without a public sector. That I think goes without saying. And you cannot have a public sector if you don't have an income. You have to have something to base it on. So yes, for every country, revenues are extremely important. In Denmark, we I think been quite successful for many years to have a well-functioning taxation system. We have probably the highest personal income taxation in the world. We sometimes battle with a few other countries, but we're up there and pay, for every, every dollar I make, I pay half of it before I ever see it back to the state again.
I hear you pay your taxes with a smile on your face.
Of course we do. There's nothing so nice as to immediately give half of your salary away. So it's a truth with a certain modification. It's not totally true. Nobody likes to give away the money that they thought they had in their hand. On the other hand, it is true, because it is, for us in Denmark, it is so that we believe that the money that we pay actually comes to good use. And that's a precondition. You cannot be satisfied with paying half of your salary to Mr. Taxman if you don't get something for it. But we have developed a welfare system based on exactly a strong revenue that then translates into a good healthcare system, free for all, a good education system, not only primary, secondary school, but university,
Tertiary.
free for all. And by the way, when you go to university in Denmark, you don't just get the university for free, you also get kind of a salary while you study. So you get allowances, so you can pay a dormitory or a room or a small apartment, or you can pay for the rent together with others for a small apartment. So you can make it through your studies independently of whether your parents are rich or poor, which is very important because that creates a strong social mobility. So it doesn't matter if you're born out of a rich family or a single mother who is unemployed, you still have a chance to make it. That's very important in the Danish concept. But it's not only education and health, it's infrastructure. I mean, to ensure that you have roads without potholes. I'm just joking a little bit, but if you imagine that, that would be nice, wouldn't it? I mean, things like that. But you also have to consider other things. Your armed forces, your police, they don't come for free. Of course they don't. And to have a proper armed forces, to have a proper police force, to have a proper taxation system with customs officers, Ghana immigration service, you can't do it without revenues. It's just not possible. You also have to have some kind of influx into even in your private sector. Sometimes you need to have some kind of public infusion of funds to make certain things happen. Also there, you need a proper revenue to be able to support those sectors in society that needs to be developed and developed fast. Whether it's during a crisis like COVID, where some are suffering, you need to be able to infuse some of those businesses so that they can survive during the bad times. That's where proper revenue comes in. Of course, you have to be sure that those who are the tax collectors are doing the job right, that they're well educated, and that they do it properly. You have to make sure that when you have generated the funds, that they are truly getting through the system and getting out there where the politicians elected by the people have decided it should go. If you want to strengthen your education system, you need to be able to have the necessary funds. So you need to make sure they get there all the way. If you want to have swimming pools, because you need to exercise in sports facilities, because you need to exercise your youth, you need to make sure that those funds get there on time and without loss on the way.
So the system must work.
The system must work, and it does work, and we would not be paying our taxes with a smile if it wasn't working. I mean, we might be a little ignorant up north where I come from, who are not that ignorant. If it wasn't working, we wouldn't be smiling when we paid our taxes.
I would say that's the incentive for paying your tax
at
the
the
end of the day.
But it's also what makes the wheels go around in the big picture. And if you go back a few years to the financial crisis, the global financial crisis, part of what happened there was that some economies, there were many, many factors, but some economies fell apart because they lacked the necessary strong structures in and around taxation, creating the necessary funds for society to continue to work. That was the backbone that kind of broke when the crisis hit. So you need to have a well-functioning tax system. And of course you need to deal with issues, the big issue that we all talk about, and sometimes it's not nice to talk about, corruption.
Right.
If you don't deal with corruption, at the end of the day, any country will fall apart.
If we don't deal with corruption, at the end of the day, any country will fall apart. Now, Denmark has a population of 6 million, close to 6 million people, if I can say so. Ghana has a population of about 30 million people, let me say. Let me ask, how many percent of Danes actually pay taxes?
Well, I would go so far as to say that most of those who are in work are also paying taxes. It's pretty difficult to evade the taxation system. It's very efficient. It's very much digitalized. So, and we can talk about that also, because I think that's a very, very important part of how to deal with corruption. Something that also I think your government right now, especially your vice president, has focused very much on, is digitalization as an instrument to deal with corruption. Because if you digitalize strongly, then you can actually capture the earnings and the spendings and the transactions in a way that it is not possible to
steal
escape.
money.
Or-
Yeah,
yeah,
yes, I can say to steal
Yeah.
money. But I also would want to say we have a population of 30 million, over 30 million
Mhm.
people, and there is less than 10% of us paying taxes. And that's why I'm asking the best practices. What are we doing in this area?
Well, I think what you are doing now, and what is going to be very important, I think, is the Ghana card.
Right.
And I'm very proud, and I'll just let that slip in to the conversation somehow, if you don't mind, that the development of the Ghana card originally was a Danish-Ghanaian business-to-business corporation.
Right.
It started supported by Danish development funds between the Martins Group and the Danish business developing this concept. It's many years ago, it has taken time, it's still being developed. But we're now at a place where the Ghana card exists, everybody knows what it is. I don't think it's being used yet, definitely not to the fullest extent. But when you have it fully in action, then you are really able to ensure so many things. You will ensure that those who need to pay taxes will, because you can register the earnings. You can register because you're using your credit cards, but you have a Ghana card. There's only one identity per person. Your mobile transactions, when you purchase a car, when you purchase a house, whatever will be registered. It's not possible to, as you said, steal, to evade the taxation system in the same way. So I think it's a very, very important instrument in trying to create that revenue that is necessary. So I think you have your best practice on the way. It's coming. But it has to, of course, enforcement. It's not enough to have
I was just coming to that.
a mechanism if you don't enforce it.
Right.
So you need to have the proper enforcement. And then again, that takes a lot of efforts. It takes training, education, to build up the capacity necessary. But again, there we know it is possible. And again, going back to the years when we were here with development assistance, we were supporting the Ghana Revenue Service Authority, the customs authorities, in building up some of their capacity, which is today put to good use. So we know that a lot of things can be done. The structures are there, the people are there, the training has taken place. It's just that getting the wheels running is always an issue. It takes time.
It takes time.
And it takes political will, to be honest.
Well,
It does.
It takes a lot of political will. Now let's move away from collaboration in the area of revenue collection. Can we talk about data exchanges between the two countries or cooperation in that particular area?
When I studied at the university way back, so many years ago, you don't want to think about it. One of the worst things we could talk about as part of the education was when we had to do statistics. It sounded so boring to me. I said, the worst thing, statistics. It's full of dust and But in reality, statistics are extremely important because statistics are the basis for taking the real and the right decisions. If you don't have proper statistics, and with that I mean real-time statistics, what is going on in society? How are people moving? How many newborns are there? How many kids go to school? How many drop out of school? How many have measles? How many mothers have issues during their pregnancies? If you don't have that real-time data or the highway information, how many cars are breaking down because of potholes or because of lack of traffic lights, the accidents
on
and
roads and
motorcycles and thousands of things. In order to take the right decisions, timely decisions, you need real-time data. And this is something that we have worked very closely between Ghana Statistical Service, who is a very visionary leader, managing director, Prof, And the Danish Statistical Service, have worked together now for some years, trying to exactly focus on this issue of what we call administrative data, but it really means real-time data, as opposed to a census every 10 years and outdated data. So this is something that has been, I think, very beneficial for Ghana and is continuously being worked on. We're continuing that cooperation. And something that I would call one of our small success stories in the big world, maybe not so interesting for many people, but I think extremely important for how we also take both administrative decisions, but also how members of parliament and members of government take the right decisions at the right time.
Interesting. Of course, data is very important in every aspect of our life. But before we go, let's talk about healthcare. We didn't do much on healthcare, and I know we have some very important, projects and so many things happening in that area. We can't really go without talking about healthcare.
Well, healthcare is very important for all of us. We already talked about it, actually. We talked about how water and clean water is actually a prerequisite for better health for the population. So that's one thing, without even going into the area of the health care sector.
Yes.
But one area that we are very proud of is, and there I talk about a specific Danish company actually, called Novo Nordisk, which provides insulin to treat diabetics. Now that diabetes has been a huge problem in our so-called developed world for many years. And if you look at me a little bit here, you can see some of what happens when you live a good life. It creates a lifestyle issue. And so many people have become diabetics in the United States, in Europe. And we're very, very fortunate to have a Danish company that's one of the 3 in the world that are really in the forefront when it comes to treatment of diabetes, called Novo Nordisk. It's a global company. It's one of our largest companies overall. But they have a very strong belief not only in being a super company that knows how to make money. Of course they do. They look at the bottom line, and they have done that for many years, and it's growing every year. But what they also do is they really believe strongly in it would have been better if we didn't have to be here. So they do a lot of preventive work, trying to come in early rather than late. And here in Ghana, as they are doing in a few other African countries, they have engaged not as a commercial partner, but in actually doing some of the work that we would also have been doing as a development partner in Ghana. They're working together with the Ghanaian healthcare services, from the Ministry of Health to other service providers, healthcare service providers, to make sure that we get the diagnosis of what we call type 1 diabetes. That's actually the one that's not due to a bad lifestyle like mine, but that's the little kids that are born more or less with diabetes. But until now, we're not really diagnosed here in Ghana. Now they're given an opportunity to be diagnosed and treated through a program that Novo Nordisk is running, and we're supporting very strongly. As we also are supporting through, or Novo Nordisk is supporting, we're supporting the elderly who contract type 2 diabetes.
Oh.
Because again there, it's a problem. Often you cannot afford to go to the doctor. The doctors don't have the facilities or the knowledge to deal with it, to diagnose and then treat.
The technical know-how.
So they are now across this country, out there, helping develop this know-how and make sure that you have the facilities to really deal with what is a serious problem for many, many more Ghanaians than you would think. We've done many activities here. We had Ghanaian doctors here talking about how diabetes is spreading. And to be quite frank, you have your own, we have our diet, you have your own diet, but your diet is really, really good to create diabetes. I mean, it's diabetes friendly in a way. You have so many carbs in your diets, from your cassava
Yeah.
to your plantains, through to the yams,
Yeah.
your rice.
Yeah.
It is a carb-heavy diet, and everybody loves it. And you have it in your fufu, and you have it in your banku.
Talking about fufu and banku, which one have you tried?
Both. And I have to be honest, I'm not a favorite. I'm a little bit
not even direct,
difficult.
right? Because I've spoken to diplomats and they're like.
But what I really, really like is the kelewele.
Oh, okay.
And not the simple ones, but really spiced.
Oh.
Spiced and burnt.
Really?
As spicy as possible, yes.
Who would have thought?
I love that.
Oh, that's awesome. Awesome. Do you have a joint? You get it from, or you get them to? It's made right there for you.
Well, my cook here, she does it very, very good. I actually, where others have, if you have a party, some drinks and you get some nuts.
Yeah, and then you can.
She serves kelewele, so everybody goes around and eats kelewele. It's really nice.
Interesting. I like it. It's so good. We talk about the diabetes part when it comes to healthcare, what we do in this area, because it's very important. Carbohydrates is very, very much consumed in our food every now and then.
And on top of that, you are adopting the Western style fast food, which just adds on to your problems. So you're on a fast highway when it comes to that.
True, you're absolutely right about that. You didn't talk about maritime strategy.
No, I didn't.
We talk about maritime security, and
yes.
there is maritime strategy.
Exactly. We also have, like we have with statistics and we have with water, we have a strategic sector program on maritime, together with Ghana Maritime Authority and the Danish Maritime Authority, who have worked together in the beginning, looking very much at building up knowledge and capacity on IMO, like rules and legislation, etc. The International Maritime Organization, because as a seafaring nation, we have a lot of experience and a lot to share. So we've done a lot of that. We've done a lot of work with the ports, for instance, the port authorities, and take the nice port that you have down in Tema, Terminal 3, the new terminal there, which is partly a Danish project. It's our biggest investment in Ghana, which was a combined Danish and French investment.
Interesting to know that.
The container port, the modern container port, Terminal 3. It's called MPS, Norwegian Port Service. Yeah. But it's a combination of investments from the Danish company, APMT, which is AP Moller Terminals, which is the same company as Maersk that I talked about before. Yeah. And then it was Bolloré, a French company. Those two companies together invested no less than $1.5 billion in that. It is a very big investment, so half. So that's one of our biggest investments. But one of the things that happened there also was that you now have the largest container ships in the world coming in to the port of Tema. You need to get them in fast and safe. And you need to have people who are trained to do that. So you have these little tugboats that guide this. Have you ever seen them when they go in down there? They're enormous. So you guide them in. So you have to have a well-trained tugboat captain and a pilot that you have on board the actual vessel that's coming in, the container ship, so that you get these in fast and safe. So part of this maritime cooperation has also been simply to train pilots and not flight pilots, but the pilots that go on board, and tugboat captains in Denmark. So those are little things, maybe, but very important things, because they ensure that we have safe arrival and departure, but also, again, swift, which means, yes, the Danish vessels are coming in and out, and other countries' vessels are coming in and out very fast. And again, it contributes to the economy here. It strengthens the economy. The faster they come in and out, the more economic
Right.
activity there is, also for Ghana. So it's a very, very important cooperation. The fact that climate change has an impact
Right.
also in the shipping world. So what we're very much looking forward to is working together with and already started between those two entities, looking at green shipping, green ports. How do we green the ports? How do we make sure that what we're doing contributes not to CO2 emissions, but to reducing CO2 emissions? So we just had less than a month ago, or about a month ago, we had a huge conference on green shipping organized between Ghana Maritime Authority and Danish Maritime Authority and the IMO. Here, it took place at the Bali Beach. 2 days. It was the first of its kind in all of Africa. It will not be the last, I can tell you,
Right.
because already when we left, there were several of the other countries participating. There were 18 different African countries, coastal countries participating, with the top people from each country on the maritime sector. So we really had all the right people there, and they were all on board. This is where we're going in the future. So it was a very, very important conference, and very important for Ghana Maritime Authority.
And of course, the future is bright when it comes to relations between Denmark and Ghana.
I certainly hope so.
The Prime Minister of Denmark was in Ghana in 2021. You are here.
Yes.
That was part of deepening relations between Denmark and Ghana.
Absolutely.
How was that for you?
Well, first of all, it was stressful. I can't say that on TV, but it was really stressful because it came about very quickly. So we only had a couple of weeks to plan it and execute it. But it was a very successful visit. We managed a lot. We had some very, very good political conversations between the Prime Minister and your President. We had some very, very good conversations with civil society. We had a lot of different civil society representatives that got to meet the Prime Minister and talk about different aspects of life here, seen from their side. We focused on the water issues. We took the Prime Minister to the poorest parts of Tema, Newtown, I think it's called, the most densely.
Yeah.
We walked around there for half an hour, 45 minutes. The Ghanaian police and authorities were a little, you can't take your Prime Minister there, but we did. And it was really an eye-opener to her. She learned a lot. We also talked about the issues of piracy. And the idea was that she was supposed to go on board the Danish frigate, which is a very large Navy vessel that was here to combat piracy on the second day of her arrival here. But that was cancelled. And you could say, Mike, how can you cancel something like that? Because they just went away. So they weren't there when the Prime Minister was coming.
Oh.
Well, they went away because they were actually doing their job.
Right.
They went out because there were pirates sighted. They went out and they encountered the pirates. They went into the most robust piracy operation in the Gulf of Guinea so far. Unfortunately, there were lives lost. That's never something you want. Others were captured. And according to what we hear from our Ghanaian friends in the Navy, it had an impact in itself on trying to put a damper to the piracy activities. So it was a very important thing that happened, very disruptive for a Prime Minister visit. And suddenly part of the visit was poof, gone. But we managed to fill other things in very fast. It was a very successful visit. And I should also mention that our Prime Minister actually studied in her youth at the University of African Studies,
Right.
but was never in West Africa. She had been to East Africa several times. So this was her first West African visit, which in itself made it a very, very special visit for her. So it was a very successful visit, and we were very happy to carry it out.
Happy to learn that. So let me ask you something. How often do you get yourself into trouble?
Never, of course. I'm a well-behaved young man of almost 64, yes.
I asked this question because I remember very well the MP for Ningo Pram Sam George
Yes.
mentioned your name and asked that you are recalled to your country because of your interest in a very sensitive issue, which is the LGBTQI plus issue. Your views on the LGBTQI plus. We talk about human rights. We still haven't come to terms with that.
Well, that's what it is, exactly. It's we're often told it's about a lot of other things, but it's really about one thing only, and that is to protect the human rights of any minority group. So if we mean protection of human rights, which we do very strongly, we've all signed up to the Declaration on Human Rights, Universal Declaration on Human Rights. We believe strongly that all minority groups should be protected, whether it's religious minorities, ethnic minorities, whether it's based on race, or it's gender, or it's based on your sexual orientation. You should not be persecuted. You should be protected. That's all we say. We have no interest in anything else. I know that it's sometimes being brought out that some countries are here to promote our values. We don't have a special
Western culture.
We don't have a special Western culture when it comes to sexual orientation. We don't have a Danish culture that comes to sexual orientation, or a Danish value that is called sexual orientation of a specific sort. In Denmark, you are who you are, and you are free to enjoy the rights, whether you have one sexual orientation or another, whether you come from one ethnic group or another, whether you come from one religious group or another. It's simply a matter of protecting minorities' human rights.
And there have been debates about lack of water in some communities as human rights, and not being able to afford food, food insecurity, or not being able to afford food is a human rights issue, as to rather talking and supporting this cause, which is LGBTQI plus. Why don't we rather focus on other more important issues?
Do you think?
That's a huge.
But it's not an either or. It's not a matter of choosing whether to take it seriously that we need to have clean drinking water, or to protect human rights. You can do both. And I think we just earlier in our discussion discussed very much how it is very, very important for us, both in our development assistance, but also in our commercial approach to things, to ensure that, in this case, Ghana is given all the opportunities that are within our might to have access to clean and affordable drinking water. So it's not an either or, it's a both and. I think you can do both and.
Thank you so much for your time.
I'd be happy to.
So,
thank you.
Yep.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been a very fruitful conversation talking about the various areas of cooperation between Denmark and Ghana. We talked about water and sanitation, healthcare, diabetes. We also talked about the maritime strategy, very important, and data collection and revenue generation when it comes to Ghana as a developing country, and the partnership between Denmark and Ghana in that area. So it's been very enlightening, it's been very informative, and I hope you enjoyed my time with the ambassador. Hopefully we look forward to seeing you same time next week. Enjoy the rest of our programs. My name is Harriet Nartey. Good evening.